My name is Jeremy Walton, and this is the Film Look using filters. Let's go! The Film Look. What does that mean exactly? It can actually mean a lot of things if you look online. Sometimes people call it the cinematic look. I've done multiple videos on this topic. One is using software like FilmConvert to apply a film look in post that actually replicates film stocks. Another series I've done is What is Cinematic Filmmaking? And this is where I dive deeper into specific films and techniques to really examine what the term means and, more importantly, how it might contrast to what you think makes a cinematic image. I highly recommend watching those videos. I'll put a link in the description as well, because a lot of what I'll cover in this video goes hand in hand with those videos. So why am I making another film look video? Well, there's many things that can contribute to a film look. We're talking set design, wardrobe, lighting, but if you're on a budget, those items might be scaled back or be non-existent. So what can we do? What areas can we focus on to at least point us in the right direction? What I want to do in this video is cover a few films and cinematographers that talk about their process when shooting digital and how I try and apply similar results. Then it's time to do some tests with two different filters. One that gets used a lot, which is the Tiffen Black Pro Mist, and another that I feel rarely gets mentioned. So stick around to see what filter that is and for the results. Okay, the first film I'm going to bring up is to show you how one DP, Rob Hardy, who continuously shoots on film, tackled shooting on digital. The film was Machina, directed and written by Alex Garland. For this movie and its budget, film wasn't an option, so camera tests began. Testing, something to keep in mind with your projects. Posting on forums and watching YouTube videos is a good resource, but nothing will compare to doing tests yourself and making choices based on those tests. When doing his tests, Rob Hardy explains, the Aryan Red did lovely things in their own ways, but they didn't seem to have the ability to really show the truth of the glass, especially when working so much with digital now. Glass has become the new emulsion. That's where one of the major choices is now. After extensive testing, the camera he went with was the Sony f/65, and for the glass, his choice was the Cooke Crystal Express lenses. When making this choice, Hardy goes on to say, I think it's just a feeling, which is why I think the testing process is so important. When I look through the finder, I'm looking for a feeling, and it's just a question of finding it. That kind of an approach works for me and might be something to consider when you're deciding on camera choices and lenses. It wasn't about what's the best lens or best camera. Being a filmmaker involves testing and finding out what you like. I think Hardy sums all this up and brings up another interesting approach when talking film versus digital and his choices he made for Ex Machina. You know, when I used to shoot 16mm, I'd always shoot with very sharp lenses like Master Primes, things like that, simply because it could cut through the beautiful grain and everything that 16mm has. But it sort of makes it, you know, three-dimensional, I guess, and this is the opposite of that. So basically, he was trying to take the edge off the digital look by using certain lenses. For me, this is how I like to take the edge off. Woo! Now, we don't always have the opportunity to shoot on cinema cameras and have $100,000 or more lens packages. So what can we do? Let's take the same principles Hardy chose and look to filters. Once again, Hardy collaborated with Alex Garland on the Hulu series Devs. I won't get into all the technical specs since we've covered how Hardy likes to work, but when it comes to filtration on the camera, just a little Tiffen Pro Mist diffusion. Sometimes to aid the way the light behaved on certain shots, or where I wanted to mitigate a highlight, lower the contrast, and soften the picture. When it comes to diffusion, you have a lot of choices. If you go on Tiffen's website, you'll see a large list of filters to choose from. But one popular one is the Black Pro Mist, which also has other names and flavors with other companies. I'm just going to stick with Tiffen for this video. The Black Pro Mist comes up time and time again. I actually own this filter. It's a 58mm and a quarter strength. On Tiffen's website, the Black Pro Mist is described as a gauzy paint-like halation. So maybe we can't use Cooke lenses, but we can use filters. I've used the Black Pro Mist for certain shoots, but it's not my go-to. There's a particular look I'm going for when I'm using it, like this boot commercial I did. I was going to be shooting outdoors and wanted that halation effect. Not so much a film look, in my opinion, or at least the feeling it gives me. Like I mentioned, this was a quarter strength, and for most people that I've heard talk about this filter, they also live in the quarter to an eighth world. Above that, it just seems too strong and gives you that dreamy feeling. Tiffen does have some examples of this, and you can see this effect grow depending on the filter strength you select. So let's do a couple real world shots as well with the quarter strength and see what you think. Just a side note, this isn't a control test, so the images being shot are slightly different. Don't worry about that though, you'll still be able to see the differences using the filter and what it can offer. Everything was shot in 4K and in log. I threw on a log to Rec 709 LUT, made a few adjustments, but that was basically it. Here's my first shot with no filter. Nothing too crazy, but we do have a lot going on. A few things to take notice of. The contrast in the scene, the shadows and the definition in the grass, and then the highlights. Here's the same shot with the black pro mist. Right away I can see how the contrast was dropped and the image is softer. You really notice this in the grass. The sharpness we see in shooting digital is knocked off, and remember, we're only at a quarter strength. We can also see the blooming of the highlights as well. Now here's a side-by-side comparison. I really think this can give you a good idea of what this filter can do, especially looking at what's happening on the left side of each image, from contrast to the highlights, and all it took was screwing on a filter. Pretty impressive so far, but as I mentioned earlier, this isn't my go-to filter. For me, when I want to take the edge off, this is what I use. I love the Tiffen Black Satin filter. It's a 58mm and the density is a 1. The filter is described as rendering highlights with a grittier, more grainy appearance. When I'm thinking film look and what I like in a filter, I lean towards the Black Satin filter. But as you can see from the earlier examples, it all really depends on the look you're going for, and that's why I wanted to talk about Rob Hardy and his choices. I used the Black Satin filter on a Nether boot commercial, and from these clips you can probably see why I did. This look went hand in hand with the grittier, more grainy appearance. I use this filter pretty much all the time. I'm using it right now because I really love the look and it fits my aesthetic for this channel and for projects I work on. So feel free to watch all my previous videos if you want to see more examples. Now I'm going to show you a couple more examples like I did with the Black Pro Mist, then do some side-by-side comparisons. But let's first take a look at one of my favorite shows, which is Peaky Blinders. And for season 5 we had Anthony Byrne as director and Cy Bell as DP. When being interviewed about their approach for season 5, Bell said, "We both wanted to stay true to what has made Peaky such a success, but also bring a different energy to the story." Originally the show was shot with the Alexa and used spherical lenses. At the time, Netflix wanted a true 4K sensor, so again, after doing extensive tests, they decided to go with the Red Monstro 8K and opted for Cooke anamorphic lenses. We needed and got a softer, more naturalistic look that didn't make a statement that we were changing the show. We had the perfect balance with the Cooke look that carried over since the 3rd season, which really enhanced the cinematic scale of the series and brought it to a new level. Can you see a theme here? Different directors and DPs, different styles, different TV shows / movies, but the research and prep stayed the same. Yes, we don't always have the money, resources, or equipment like these shows, but I think it's important to understand the process and the approach. It was about having a look in mind, then finding out what they needed to do to accomplish that look. Another part of that look was diffusion. A Tiffen quarter black satin filter was used most of the time, with NDs and rotating polarizers, just to take the shine and reflections off certain things. Yeah, I'll say it again. To take the edge off. Now my black satin is at a 1, and they used a quarter strength. I'm going to take a guess and say it was dependent on the lens choice, but if we go to Tiffen's website, again, we see with the 58mm, my only choice was the 1, 2, or 3. If you want to get into fractions, you'll need to step up to a bigger filter or a matte box. Here's our first example with no filter. I tried to find a Peaky Blinders inspired location. A lot going on here in terms of textures, which is what I like. Again, pay attention to the details we discussed earlier, and let's see what this filter can do. Right away, the first thing I noticed was the image being softened. The sharpness of the textures and even throughout the lines of the scaffolding start to look more pleasing. Along with the contrast being reduced, the highlights even out without a significant blooming effect, which is what I really like. The last part of this test is to show you a side-by-side comparison between the two filters on the footage I shot. Here's the field with the black Pro Mist on the left and the black Satin on the right. Between these two, I think it's the highlights that make the biggest difference. Now here's the warehouse footage, and what stands out is the softness between the two. The quarter strength black Pro Mist is a little much for my taste. I think the black Satin accomplishes what I need without the dreamlike features. Filters are just another part of the equation when you're trying to achieve the so-called film look. Don't think one thing, one filter can 100% give you the results you want. Maybe it's software, lighting, filters, cameras, lenses, or a combination of everything that can help you achieve your look. That's why understanding the process, doing research and testing like this and in the examples I showed is so important when it comes to being a filmmaker. We even have some new filters on the market that were recently released, so if you're in the market, I'd test them all. Ultimately, I can't make up your mind for you, but maybe this video can point you in the right direction. Well, there you have it, the film look using filters. Hope you enjoyed the video. Hit that like button because there's definitely more in the way. Subscribe so you don't miss out. But until then, comment below and let me know what you do to take the edge off. And as for this episode, it's a wrap.